All right, everyone, we are back for part 4 of our lecture. We are going to talk about one more composer in regards to Out with the Old, In with the New, and that is Edgar Varese. So he's a composer who really split the bill fairly equally between writing acoustic compositions for instruments of, the classical and romantic and eras, at least instruments that were perfected during those eras in a kind of 20th century context, but also exploring works for the electronic medium. Let's go ahead and start with his acoustic works. And the first piece that we're going to check out is a piece that was written in the 1920s, and it's called Ionization. Remember, we're listening to 3 things with our listening examples now. We're listening for, what's happening with the texture and the rhythm, the texture and what's happening with the rhythm, in addition to what is the instrumentation that we're listening to. This piece is written for a percussion ensemble. So that's the instrumentation that we're dealing with. Just a consort of instruments that is mostly either auxiliary or non-pitched instruments or keyboard instruments, which are sometimes grouped within the percussion family. This work definitely requires a conductor because there is a lot of rhythmic irregularity that is happening here. We're going to be able to watch the conductor for at least some of it, and you'll notice that his hand, Pierre Boulez is conducting, that his hand patterns are constantly shifting and changing. This is a reflection of the presence of mixed meter in a piece of music, and that pulse is being irregularly divided. So not only do we have mixed meter, but probably asymmetrical meter as well. As we've discussed before, when we are only dealing with percussive instruments, it is so much more difficult to figure out what's happening texturally. Why? Because our interpretation of texture really relies on figuring out who is most important and who is secondary. And in this case, when all of the instruments are non-pitched or are not capable of playing melody, the idea of this really becomes a little bit more like this, or even this, like where they are simultaneous. So we're probably going to hear a little bit more interest in heterophonic texture and polyphonic texture for that reason. Let's go ahead and listen and see what we hear. Instrument is called a lion's roar. It's a suspended drum, and what's happening is you create friction against the rope that's hanging through the drum, and it rattles the actual membrane at the top of the drum, creating like a low groan or something that sounds kind of similar to a lion's roar. This instrument is a snare drum, wood blocks, these instruments are non-pitched though. Snare drum being played by different mallets or implements which create a different kind of timbre, something that's a little bit softer than wood block. stop it there for right now. It goes on for a little bit longer, and the ending section has like these big clusters, like where you're putting both of your forearms on the piano. Lots of dissonance, things that don't sound at rest. This definitely fails the elevator test. Why? It's irregular in so many ways. There is rhythmic irregularity. There's lots of mixed meter and the presence of asymmetrical meter, and not a lot of ostinato, not a lot of repeating musical ideas for us to sort of hang our hats on. Texturally, it's also really difficult to create a hierarchy because everything is, or for the most part, everything's pretty non-pitched. It doesn't have like nothing feels like particularly melodic to us. And therefore, like our ability to create a hierarchy of sounds and delineate like who's in what category of like whose melody and whose accompaniment is pretty much impossible. So this is kind of part and parcel for percussion instruments because typically they are a little bit more percussive oriented and more about articulating rhythm and meter. They're going to be more exploratory in that kind of regard. Let's take a listen to something totally different. Edgar Varese, in addition to writing, like years later, Edgar Varese was invited to the World's Fair to write a piece of music or to compose a piece of music or assemble a piece of music that was played in the Phillips Pavilion. And what was interesting is it was a part of, like I said, the World's Fair, which was all about the newest of the new. And what he did was create a work that is considered a piece of musique concrète. And musique concrète is when you take pre-recorded musical examples and you assemble them together. The earliest version of musique concrète was doing this exact thing with physical tape, which, like, if you guys have ever seen a cassette tape, like you can take apart a cassette tape and actually cut sections of the tape apart and then tape them back together, literally with actual tape on one side, and play that concoction, and you'll come up with a piece of musique concrète. We do it a little bit more, obviously, digitally now. But the use of samples and sampling is an invitation of musique concrète on popular music. So let's take a look at what the Phillips Pavilion as a part of the World's Fair in Brussels was like. Let me give you some media footage from that time. So, Brussels World Fair, 1958. Great. So, pause. Wonderful. So, the World's Fair was like a big ordeal to take part in, but it was about exhibiting the newest of the new. And the Phillips Pavilion, like Philips, the company that still does a lot of audio stuff now, put together a really interesting installation space where there were projections of light and then like essentially speakers that were mounted to the ceiling, but the ceiling was all in different shapes. So like you would walk through the space and hear this piece called Poem Electronique. And that was the piece that Edgar Varese composed, which was all like pre-assembled tape collages. So let's take one more look at like with a little bit of a voiceover that was a little bit of an advertisement for the World's Fair before looking at what Poem Electronique was about.
As the opening date of the Brussels World's Fair nears, the elaborate pavilions of the 48 nations taking part are rushed to completion. America's building, the world's largest freestanding circular structure, will be an architectural landmark. Scores of international and commercial groups are also taking part in the rivalry for the attention of the 40 million visitors expected. One of the commercial exhibits is a vast diorama of the Belgian countryside, which will model a prophecy of progress in transportation. Under a complex electronic control system, the diorama will show the transformation from today into the world of the future.
Awesome. I love that. It has a very Tomorrowland feel to it. So what did the Philips Pavilion look like? And like it was this very strange three-dimensional space, obviously, because it was a building that you could enter, but it had like all sorts of shapes and curves and dips in the ceiling. There were tons of speakers that were mounted to the ceiling, so like your audio experience would change and your visual one would change as you walked through the space. So this is a little bit of what you would see and hear. Hold on for a moment. Okay, I'm not sure people in 1958 really knew what to even think about this. I think when they were going to like the Brussels World Fair, they were expecting like things like Tomorrowland, and then they got this weird installation space with Edgar Varese's Poem Electronique. The images that you saw were the things that were actually projected onto the ceiling and wall and floor surfaces as people would walk through this space. So it's hard to kind of approximate what the experience would have been like back then, obviously much more immersive, but there's sounds here that are very reminiscent of timbres that Luigi Russolo was very, very interested in. Mid-century electronic music starts to come on the scene. We have some early synthesizers like the Moog and the Buchla that are very popular in the decades to follow. But a lot of experimentation when it comes to the electronic realm of things mid-century and on, and obviously that continues to today. So that kind of concludes our lecture topic for Out with the Old, In with the New. The following two lectures that are a part of our second unit, I recorded at the start of us being in quarantine, which means that there's a little bit of a curve in how I learned how to use the materials to obviously record and disseminate lectures to you guys. So apologies that the next video won't kind of be as perhaps wonderful. If we have to be online in a prolonged format, I will be re-recording these lectures, but at this point, because these have only been used once, you'll be using the ones that I literally just recorded a couple weeks ago, or a few weeks ago. So at least in the first few videos, I don't embed the recordings that are a part of the lecture, then ended up doing so, which has been kind of varied in terms of success. Sometimes YouTube cuts them out, sometimes YouTube lets me leave them in. I've been in many conversations with YouTube since. So I thank you in advance for your patience with dealing with this sort of like curve in learning from me. As always, if you have any questions, best to leave them in the comment section. You might have a question that someone else has, and I might be able to answer it for the both of you guys. Additionally, yeah, I will endeavor in the future to put these on perhaps a different medium, and like I said, re-record these with better perhaps sound quality with an actual microphone. But the way that we were thrown into this whole situation really didn't have that amount of time to perfect my online abilities. So thank you for your patience. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed a little bit of Out with the Old, In with the New. Because I'm a composer who works obviously in the 21st century, I am really interested in the experiments that happened in the 20th century to lead us to where we are today. So I hope I introduce you to some new pieces and new composers, and I'll see you guys back for our third lecture in our timbre topic, which is going to be about oh gosh, the color-driven orchestra, the idea of the expanding orchestra, which is, oh, what a wonderful lecture. It's a really fun one to engage in. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. I will see you guys for the next session where I have shorter hair. I don't have to wear a hat all the time. Take care, guys. Bye.